improv and comedy might be the very last bastion of safety from algorithmic generated stuff. That'll be the last thing the machines learn, is how to make people laugh, I think.
Yeah, well, because a buddy of mine ran Chat GPT, and he typed in do a joke about dating in the style of Martin Morrow, and he sent out what it said to me, and I was like, this is terrible. Does this mean that I am not funny, or that AI has not yet captured humor, so it just thinks like joking is talking a lot?
Well, I'm going to leave that an open question. Well, I welcome everybody to AI Affected, the show about algorithms and machine learning and how they're affecting our lives and our relationships and our work. Very excited to introduce today's guest. He is an actor, a comedian, a writer, a Second City touring company ensemble member. You've seen his face in a million national commercials. He looks like your friendly accountant or insurance agent, and one of my favorite humans. Please welcome Martin Morrow.
Hey, Russ. Good to see you.
Thanks for coming in, man.
Thank you. And you're also one of my favorite humans.
Oh, good. I'm going to start calling this the Favorite Humans podcast, because who knows if we're going to talk about AI, but at least you're here, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we were just talking about how you work in social media, and so the analogy when I was thinking about this last night was like that movie, The Hurt Locker.
Yeah.
Where it's like, it's almost as if you can do more harm quickly by doing the wrong thing in social media than you can help a brand by doing the right thing in social media.
Yeah.
So like, how, as a professional who like gets hired to do this, how much of it is like the hands-off approach so you don't blow anything up, as opposed to the actually trying to like cultivate and build a following and stuff like that?
Well, you know, it's funny because a lot of it, there's so many different levels, and especially where I just left, but it was always like, there's the creative director, and then there's the head of this, and then there's this person, and then there's these people who have to look at this, and then you're at the bottom writing everything, and then they all just kind of like, we helped with that, sort of, and so
is the help that they're like punching it up and making it funny, or is it just they're there to make sure that it's not going to offend any of the executives and that kind of stuff?
A lot of it is trying to not offend executives. If it's entertainment, you don't want to offend the actors. You like on one project, like the director was very heavily involved, and we had released an image of two of the main characters that kind of spoiled the entire movie. And he was like, "Hey, you guys just spoiled the movie. Can you take that down?" And we were like, "Oh, yeah, I get it." But then it has to go back through this chain of command of like, "Oh, do we have to tell this person?" That kind of thing. So there's so many. I feel like there's so many checks and balances that it really takes a lot of people to be stupid to mess up something in that caliber, or it's intentional. Of like what was the Burger King tweet of women belong in the kitchen, that the Burger King UK, yeah,
amazing,
yeah. And I don't even, here's the other thing, I don't know if that's a real tweet that happened, but we saw it and people still bring it up.
It was a campaign anyway.
Yeah,
whether it was actually tweeted out by some crazy mad lad social media guy or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I was doing social media for an app that was a small, like, regional car sharing app in, like, San Francisco, but it was owned by AAA. So the mothership was this gigantic entity that, even though it wasn't representing itself as AAA, it was still like, we have 50 million members of these just old folks who subscribe and just send in their check every year and don't want to think about it. And the last thing they want is to awaken people to something offensive that came out of social media from this car sharing app that's trying to be a little bit more edgy because it's, you know, aiming toward a younger demographic than like AAA members. Yeah. But yeah, that had, every email had to be checked by like 8 people and had to go up and down the chain before you could get a word out. And wrestling with the tone was really hard too, of like, we want to be snarky, but not too snarky, you know?
Yeah, everything now is, we want to be X, but not too YZ. And you're like, well, if you're going to be X, then you're going to hit the line of Y and Z. So it's really, like, I honestly think if you eliminated 3 out of the 10 people on every totem pole, that in-between squad, you would have the better product and the better, social media and the better kind of output. But they don't want to do that because then who's going to talk to this guy in this email?
Right. There's only one guy that can talk to the mid-level manager before it goes back to the home office. In all honesty, though, I think that the current macroeconomic situation that we're in might just be killing off those 3 people on the totem pole, like just via the momentum of all of the wipeouts in tech right now.
Yeah.
It's like everybody has to look at their position and be like, what do? You send the composed tweet from that's already edited to the next guy, and that's your whole job. He's like, yeah, but he doesn't know how to use Twitter, so I have to email him all the tweets. So
yeah,
makes sense.
It's weird when I feel like if you ever get to the actual top of whatever company that's doing brand to brand or doing any type of social media, you find out it's just like a blob that has a stick and it's like, well, that looks good, and please send that out.
So your visual of the final approval is basically Jabba the Hutt.
Yes, Jabba the Hutt with half of a broomstick.
He makes all of the decisions on tone.
That might come off racist. Which emoji skin should we use? That kind of thing.
Is that a big bone of contention too?
It is. It very much depends because
literally what shade of thumbs up do you use in posts? Is it the yellow kind of excuse me, like the Homer Simpson-esque, so it's not like a real race, or is it like closer to what the people tweeting look like, or how did they decide that?
So the general a lot of it depends on the voice and the branding. So the general rule of thumb would be use the yellow one because there's no way that anybody could be mad about this kind of regular thing,
except perhaps for the jaundiced people out there.
Yeah, shout out to the jaundiced,
the yellow
community. And then there are a couple where it was like, okay, well, we use the brown hand or the black hand because it's supposed to be a black lady, and then it'll be like me typing it or whatever, or you find out, oh, it's this white lady who actually tweets this out, so she's using the brown hand, and is like even this movie that I worked on recently, where we had to kind of create the social media voice and tone for it. It was like an all Asian female movie.
I could see how they would be ultra sensitive about trying to match the skin tone to the thumbs up emoji for that, because they're like, what color thumbs up do we use for the Asian one and all that stuff.
But I think additionally it was because the person that they put in charge of a lot of the stuff was like, no, it should be more like, yeah, bitches, and so my stuff felt more grounded and more real. And she was like, no, we want it exciting with bitches at the end of everything. So she would go back and change my stuff and would put bitches or a big cuss. Because a lot of the brands are like, I mean, you can cuss, but don't go overboard. And I'm like, you're just adding bitches to everything. That's not that doesn't change the dynamic of it at all.
How do I get that job? That's a good one.
the comma bitches job?
Yeah, exactly. I bitch things up professionally. Okay, so this is really interesting that we're talking about proper use of emojis, because I feel like I'm trying to think of a meta analogy for what social media is, as somebody who lives and swims in those waters. It almost seems like it doesn't quite have a real parallel to anything that's happened beforehand in human history. It's not like a bunch of monks passing pamphlets around that they just printed out on a printing press, because it's kind of it's almost like the written word is becoming obsolete before our eyes, and we're going back to hieroglyphs or something like that.
Yeah.
Because everything is images and symbols more so than the words.
Yeah. Well, and I think additionally, words matter, but they matter more so in a caption sense. So the visual is the most important part, but it's okay, well, what if someone's watching this while they are on the train? How do we effectively do it to where they don't have to listen anymore? They can just see the things, and then you want to, again, because a lot of cuss words get flagged in a lot of videos, and so that because everyone's looking at how do I get this monetized? How do I get this pushed to the top of the algorithm or whatever. And it seems like the most kind of base level thing is if you advertise to kids, but also to people who might want to make fun of this thing for kids, and you have it to where they can watch it on mute. So it's just like this kind of weird constant of how do we get everything in that would make the most money but offend no one.
Yeah, and I mean, are you locking comments ever? Do you ever put out things where people can't respond to because you're worried about trolls and things like that? Or is it just you hope for engagement, good or bad, and it's all good?
You usually hope for engagement, good or bad. And then so like there was one movie I worked on recently in the social media sphere, and it looks like it wasn't a great movie, okay? And it hasn't come out yet, but it's not gonna. I don't think people aren't gonna be like, this is the next, Goodfellas or whatever.
I like the anti-promotional nature of what you're doing on the podcast. This is the opposite of every podcast in the world. To be like, this is a movie I worked on. Don't see it. It's not good. We're going to talk about it as an example, but it's really don't spend your time or money.
Yeah. Well, I'm being cautious with not saying the name of it. But it was, we even like went in with the kind of knowledge of, oh, this might not be a good movie, but we're going to release a trailer and hope for the best. And then the response to the trailer was like, okay, this looks corny, but like fun. Like I'll take my aunt to see this or whatever. You're like, okay, well that at least is a good kind of middle ground of,
is this like the new Medea movie or something like that?
No, I'm not going to say it. Okay. Whatever it is.
I'll stop probing.
Yeah, but yeah, that was. I think that oftentimes we hope for the best, but we know, like, because if you watch a movie in advance, you already see the flaws beyond the creative flaws. I think will always take over more than the technical ones. Yeah.
I want to push my my hieroglyphs analogy a little bit further. So you deal with the written word all the time, like not just social media, but you're a writer and you're a comedian. Right. And when you're doing stand-up, you're performing your written material to the audience. Do you think that there's a future where somehow the fact that people are being conditioned to use written language less and symbols more is somehow going to bleed into stand-up comedy and like all these traditional art forms that we do?
I don't want to say that it doesn't have the potential, because we've seen everything regress. We've seen everything evolve. Like, if I went back in time and it was like, Tinder's weird, they'd be like, what do you fire? What are you talking about? So I think anything is possible. I think especially like when pandemic comedy was happening, I think that was a very kind of telltale sign of the potential of a lot of that stuff.
When you say pandemic comedy, do you mean like Zoom shows, or what are you talking about?
Zoom shows, how that kind of evolved into, you'd see like how the thumbs up emoji, or like a lot of people did like Instagram live shows or whatever. So seeing like a fire emoji or a laugh emoji, a bunch of laugh emojis, Clubhouse is another app that kind of had a lot of that as well. Like, oh, if you see these emojis pop up, that's a good thing. We want more of that kind of engagement.
Oh, and in your brain, you're trying to replace that stuff with what normally would be laughter that you can experience in real time, instead of seeing a bunch of fires and check marks and 100s and stuff coming across the screen.
Yeah.
Oh man, how do you deal with that in real time, doing Zoom stand-up and trying to take that as the feedback you're getting from the audience?
I think a lot of it is trying to look at it as some form of growth, audience growth. So like I would always try to, hey, follow me on Instagram or this, that, the third. And I think if anything, in hindsight, I wish I would have pushed to do more TikToks during that time, because now that's the thing. But at that time, I would look at TikTok and it looked like it was just children and really weird old dudes. And I was like, oh, well, who would be on this thing? And then it becomes the #1 app. So
yeah, it seems like a lot of a few comedians that I've seen like recently trending, like they're good, but a lot of their success has to do with like being obsessed with the right format to share their videos online. Like Stavros Halkias comes to mind, because he was like this total nerdy dude from Baltimore. And like, granted, he obviously put the work in, did a million shows. And his thing was that he spent a lot of time recording himself doing crowd work, riffing with the audience. And those went viral because he would make the Instagram story. And like you said, it would have the perfect captions on it. So you could scroll by it and he'd be like, Stavi destroys this guy who's a middle manager and tells him that his life is not meaningful or something like that. And those would all go viral because he would just go around asking people what they did, and he was pretty quick on the trigger, and so he would be like, yeah, you don't have a real job or something like that. And those would go mass, as opposed to his written material, which is good but not nearly as popular as him just making fun of people in the audience on Instagram Live and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think people are finding that they can make more money online than doing, and in some cases it does translate to ticket sales, but it's also a matter of like, look, there is a time where Carlos Mencia was selling out arenas, and now he's probably on shows with me. So yeah, you never really, and that's no diss to Carlos Mencia. I don't know,
but he helped to launch like Joe Rogan's popularity, and he didn't somehow get to grab onto the coattails along the way. They have a rival podcast where he invites the opposite of a Joe Rogan guest or something.
Mencia
like
versus Rogan.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I would do that. So we were talking before about how you have considered yourself like the canceled whisperer, like somebody who helps people out who've run into this kind of backlash online.
Yeah.
I want to read you a couple quotes of your Medium article authorship.
Cool.
And you just tell me your feedback on what this means to you. I mean, you wrote it, but what it means to you. It feels like we've become poison to the unnecessary to the point where we create the havoc that we need to see.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
I think that, so there used to be a time where, like, if you read an article that said guy saves babies from burning building, it would just be, oh my God, I'm glad that this guy saved these babies. That's beautiful, right? And then that gets to run for a month, right? But now it's a thing of, if you read guy saves babies from burning building, your first reaction is, well, what was he like in 8th grade, right? What was this guy? I feel like he did something about him I don't trust. I don't like that guy. And then one person just pops up like, yeah, I knew him in college and he was an asshole to me, or whatever. And then it becomes a thing of, yeah, I heard he's an asshole. And how do you pile on to kind of diminish the voice or the light or the whatever of this story and of this person? Like, there was the one a few years ago where there was a kid who was getting bullied, and they had taken a video of him like saying he wanted to kill himself. I think he had dwarfism or something like that. And people reached out to him, celebrities and Marvel people. We want him to come to the red carpet and da-da-da-da-da. And then someone else just released an image of like, no, here's that kid partying. It's an actual adult. And then like, I think someone eventually managed to kind of shut that down, but like not really. Like if something, it's almost like a gas leak when we all lose our minds in this collective moment of, well, that's the bad guy. We need the villain. That's our villain for today. Instead of one realizing like at any moment we could all be the villain of Twitter or Instagram or our community or the apartment complex, whatever. Like
everyone is a villain to somebody in their life.
Yeah,
probably.
Or you're not living right. You know. So yeah, I think a lot of it is we create our own kind of chaos because we try to create our own villain, but we try to do this every single day. And I think a lot of that also comes from the fact that we didn't confront whatever quote unquote villain or bad guy we have in our past. So when we don't when we're not able to say fuck you to the uncle that touched me or whatever, you put it off on like some dude who you do improv with because he like said he likes butts or whatever. So it becomes like, well, where's my power now? It's a lot of it. You've heard like the whole thing of like, oh, people who got bullied end up becoming bullies.
Yeah,
it's a lot like that.
Yeah, 100%. That's really interesting. So a few shows ago, I had my buddy Patrick on, who's like a dating expert, and he was talking about kink, and he was saying, and we talked about how a lot of this stuff comes from these early childhood traumas, usually traumas or strange experiences. And then the adult is left with this thing that they're trying to feel okay about and trying to incorporate it into like a healthy sexual relationship, despite the fact that it was born out of trauma. Do you think this is a similar phenomenon where it's like somebody experienced a trauma and then they're going around trying to what they feel like is maybe save other people from a similar trauma, but really they're becoming this crusader and like trying to, burn down houses and destroy lives in the hope that they can like reverse this thing that happened to them, kind of thing.
Yeah, I do. I think a lot of it is. I think it's two-part. I think a lot of it does come from past trauma. Or past elements of like, well, my parents raised me this way and I want to break out from that. But then you end up falling in even harder with the not essentially the idea of what your parents or whoever raised you, guardians, but you fall in more with the kind of conceptualization of what they were about. So if it was like, well, I'm very Christian-y, I love Jesus, I love God, and then you break out of the church and then you become, I love this community and I'll do anything for this community and this community is my new God, right? It becomes that. I think that is kind of the second part of that, because everyone wants to look like the good guy. They want to be like, I'm the hero of this story or whatever. But it's like, that's when you try so hard to become the hero of every tale, you end up creating your own villain. You end up in being the villain as well.
Okay, so I want to separate those two things out because those are, I think, two different phenomena. So one of them is this trying to become the hero because you genuinely had some trauma that you're trying to heal the world of, and then maybe you'll go out and cause a bunch of harm because you're a little overzealous in trying to do this. Yeah. And then the other phenomenon is the wanting to project some kind of savior thing to the rest of the community. Like, how much overlap is everything just both of those? Is it that I genuinely want to do good, but then I become corrupted by my narcissistic need for feedback of people telling me that I'm doing good? Or is it there are good actors who go wrong and who are trying to save people, and then there are just bad actors who are there for attention? And like, how much is one and how much is the other?
I would almost feel like it's a definite like half and half. I think that, and we've definitely seen it before, of people who do some shady shit and then they it becomes like a super response of, how do I cover this up? Oh, if I do the most good thing of all time forever and ever, and also call attention to everyone else's shady shit, then no one's going to look at me because I've been the good guy the whole time. I've been Superman. Like, if
this is the virtue signaling smoke bomb that the ninja throws down and smashes on the floor, and they disappear in their glory.
Yeah, pretty much.
and we know people like that.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask you. So it seems like, you could argue that people have been throwing each other under the bus for their own political motives through time immemorial. Like, that's what Machiavelli wrote about. The Scarlet Letter is about everyone, being really mean to this lady because of something that she did in somebody else's private life and make her wear the letter A and all that stuff. How much of this stuff that we're talking about is just human nature, and how much of it has been like magnified or warped by the filter bubbles and the algorithms of social media?
I think that everything kind of modernizes over time. Everything kind of solidifies itself in the realm of today. So we aren't doing anything new. This isn't like a reinvention of the wheel. It's funny because every time the subject of like cancel culture or call out culture or whatever you want to, toxicity, this, that, the third, whatever, every time it gets kind of mentioned, someone's like, well, what about the women who were involved in the Salem witch trials and the witch hunt, that kind of thing, right? And I think a lot of people, when you say that, you give a very broad generalization of what happened during the Salem witch trials. Like, their idea of it, again, because a lot of these people, when you join that type of mob mentality, and I've been a part of it, I've definitely been like, yeah, get him, right? Because it's easier. It's easier. And that's literally what the Salem witch trials were. They weren't what we, like, what's my sisters, my ancestors are the the women who burned at the stake for blah blah blah. It's like, no, it was men and women, or I'll say women and men because it was majority women, and they were like outcasts or weird, or like some dude wanted to divorce his wife, or this guy was too quiet or whatever. Like it was more of a thing of, well, we don't like these people who are different than us, or these people who are weird, or these people who are trying to get a divorce. So clearly, like a demon got a hold of them, and then you take one person's like kind of innocuous story and you magnify that, right? Same with when Hollywood was like, "Who's a communist?" and everyone freaked out and they blacklisted all these like actors and stuff, right? But that was that era's version. So I think
well, this seems to me like a pretty close parallel to that, where everyone, and you see this also in East Germany post World War II, there was like the Stasi, which was the secret East German police that would listen to everybody's phone conversations. And so everyone is constantly trying to get their rivals in trouble with the Stasi by like setting them up, having phone calls with them because they know everything's being surveilled. So it does seem like you're making the argument that this is just us and this is just how people throw each other under the bus to get ahead in the world.
Yeah.
But is it just that the incentives of social media have warped it so much that now just everybody feels like they have to participate in this kind of system, this slaughterhouse online, or what?
I think so. I think because and even going back to all that, it used to be just throw someone under the bus, right? But now it's more of a thing because of the power of social media and because it's so instant. We are able to. It's not enough to just throw someone under the bus. You want to build the bus. You want to learn the training manual for the bus. You want to be able to drive the bus and park it in front of their house, and then find that dude, throw him under. You want to make sure people are on the bus, but so they can see you throw them under it, right? So it's always weirder when it's like someone who's not directly involved, which I think we see a lot more now. Or again, if it's a situation that's not directly related to XYZ, and we present it like, well, I've heard he's also racist. Like, where did that come from? We were talking about, whatever. So yeah, I think that the amplification of it is, again, wanting to be a part of something. So if we go outside and see like 10 people walking with like torches, our immediate response is, why are they walking with torches? And then we see them set like a giant monster, like let's say it's like a Frankenstein's monster, and we see him like he's curled up in a ball, and we see him get set on fire. We're like, whoa, why are they setting this creature on fire? And then if they all turn their heads and look at us like, wait, you don't think we should set this monster on fire? And then they're like, no, I do. And then we end up grabbing a torch and setting it on fire as well, because that becomes kind of the thing that feels more habitual because we don't want to get set on fire.
Oh man, I'm so glad I did my homework, because another one of my quotes is something that you're summarizing right now, which is, this is from your piece, quote, "So you've been canceled." You write, "If you're a part of the mob and stop and say, hey, let's think about this, you risk the mob turning on you."
Yeah.
So, I mean, and especially in Los Angeles, but I'm sure this happens everywhere. It seems like, especially in Los Angeles, people want to keep their heads down in general. They don't want to stick their head up. They don't want to take a stray bullet. So for the most part, if they can hide within a community that has like a relatively safe opinion, they will do it. Even if they don't 100% agree with it, even if it might rub them the wrong way, they're like, why would I make trouble when I'm trying to be cast for X, Y, and Z, and I'm trying to get friends to invite me on their improv shows or whatever? Like, why would I step out of line? My own personal point of view is like, it may be self-destructively so, is like weirdly the opposite of that. And it goes back to my family experience, which was to encapsulate very briefly, like, both of my grandparents on my mother's side had the experience of, we've lived in these like rural ethnic villages for like hundreds of years. Like, it's our whole family history is like we lived in these villages. And then one day, I mean, no, it wasn't one day. It was a gradual thing over time where a new government took over and then started to criminalize these people just for being people. So they were not allowed to be business owners anymore. Eventually, they were not allowed to keep their homes, and then they were not allowed to like marry other people from the society. And then eventually, it was all like, and you're a disease, like, 5 to 7 years into this campaign, you're vermin, you're a disease, we're going to ship you off and eliminate you from society. And it was like a slow process, but that they all lived through. And like every intellectual and aristocrat and science person of that era and that community all became to be in agreement with that position. Because over time, if you bombard people and repeat the same thing over and over again, you can move popular opinion where you want it to go.
Yeah.
So given that that's in my family history, basically whenever I see anything that I consider to be a mob, I almost always instinctually just be like, no, I'm going to be the person standing in the train tracks with this person and like giving, flipping the bird to the train that's coming, kind of regardless of the reason why the train's coming or whether it's justified, just because I know that people can err when they're in a mob, and the IQ of a mob goes down the bigger that it gets.
Yeah.
There's less thoughtfulness, the more people that, even if it's the seedling of the idea is right, like we want to protect women in society or we want social justice or any of these like just on face kind of obviously good ideas, the more people that you have more fervently believing it, like more bad stuff kind of gets swept onto the oncoming train kind of thing.
Yeah. It's very much, it's so easy to rile people up, especially now. All it takes is one tweet, one post, one whatever, and then just boosting that for the idea of that guy's bad. And we don't look at the why, because there was a few years ago where I remember hearing about there was this woman who was a doctor, and she was trying to research pedophiles. She was trying to figure out why is there a cycle of pedophiles? Why do people do this, right? And she needed funding to do the research. But
I see where this is going.
Yeah. But people didn't want to fund pedophilia, but it wasn't even, it would have been a thing to stop pedophilia. But because the visual of it was we're paying for the help for whatever you want to call it, that stopped a lot of people. And then it became, well, she was the one who did this. She wanted to help research pedophiles, and so now the attack goes on her instead of what the original objective was, which is to stop pedophilia.
Yeah, this was before social media fervor, but my old politics professor, Mark Roosevelt, grandson of Teddy Roosevelt, he was running for the governor of Massachusetts, and he was trying to put forth one of these old school progressive policies of, we need job training in prisons, because when these people get out of prisons, they need to have some vocational training. All of the statistics say they're less likely to be a recidivist if they have job training. They can go into work. But then his opponent, William Weld, the Republican at the time, was just like, oh, so we're going to spend our tax dollar money giving it to prisoners now? And then the whole Simpson-esque audience behind is like, yeah, don't give my money to prisoners. And it was like, everything we know says this is way more worth the money we spend than the money we spend on prisons themselves, in terms of improving our society. But yeah, if you can get a soundbite saying something the other way, then everyone's like, no, you're taking money away from my daughter's school and giving it to prisons or something like that.
Yeah, that should be me taking money from my daughter's school so she can't read anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You want to talk about your own personal experience with the standing in the train tracks and the train coming?
Yeah.
Metaphorically?
Yeah. I think for me, it was a lot of my problems kind of stem from just saying the wrong thing to the wrong person. When I was younger, when I was in my 20s, I just would talk shit, right? Because I was like, oh, it's not even on some I'm invincible kind of thing, but more of a, I can stand up for myself kind of deal. The issue there is, in a lot of people's eyes, or a lot of people, what they heard or saw was, oh, black guy from Alabama, he should be dumb and happy to be here. And it should be that simple. The fact that he's getting opportunities, or the fact that he is dating such and such or whatever, he should be happy to be here, instead of him wanting to rise, or instead of him fighting back or saying this, that, the third.
That's crazy. It's almost like saying you should just be happy to be alive and don't ask for anything. That's
pretty much, yeah.
That's kind of insane, yeah.
And it's not that they vocalized that, but you can, again, I think they thought that I was stupid because I'm a hick from Alabama. Yeah. So the idea was, oh yeah, that guy is not, oh, now he's doing smart jokes, or now he's He's singing on stage. He's doing this, that, and the third. He's doing improv and stand-up, right? So just pissing off the wrong people. And granted, making some bad decisions, but not egregious to the point of where you have to go after me, right? Mm-hmm. Where it should be a thing that you bring up 10, 15 years later, that kind of deal.
So wasn't the main thrust of it that you just had like a bad falling out with an ex?
Yeah.
And that your ex decided to like make it a huge public thing for whatever reason?
Yeah. So there was someone I dated for a couple of years, and it kind of just moved very fast. And I was coming off of what I would call my fuckboy phase. Because I had been single for like a year and a half, and I was doing well. I was skinny. I was like 24, 25, something like that, and just kind of flushed into a relationship. And it is not to no blame on her, but I think that I was able to kind of keep but I was doing two separate lives of like being loving, devoted boyfriend to person in the community, but also still like kind of fucking around. And then I would have other people in my ear like, yeah, man, you're supposed to. You're popular. Like that kind of thing. So then once it kind of came to a head of me telling this person like, yeah, I've cheated, right? Then it became like, and I knew personally because she had told me a story of her uncle had cheated on her aunt. And when the uncle cheated, the entire family cut him off. And I was like...
So this was, in other words, her programming.
Yeah.
This is her family programming, which is, it's a particular trigger point for her. I mean, I'm sure it is for everybody. Nobody wants to be cheated on. But, It's a particular trigger point. And so this justifies her using, like, the nuclear option when dealing with the boyfriend who's doing this. Because she's like, well, I already saw how my whole family... like literally excommunicated one of our people in our family, so this is the behavior that I will do now.
Yeah, like this, and I've been cheated on. It's not fun.
Oh yeah,
my mom got cheated on, and I think for me talking to, so I had and it's again we talk about that family dynamic, but I had cousins and this person, that person in my family, or friends who were like, yeah, I've fucked such and such. Like, but you're married to this person. Who cares? It's like, so to me, it was like, well, if that person is someone who I looked up to, or is this kind of father figure, is my whatever representative, and they're saying this action is okay, then you justify it in your head and your body of like, well, as long as I'm doing this safely, and as long as I'm not, don't mess this up and muddle this. But then that got messed up and muddled. So it was like, okay, I'm seeing now the disconnect as I got older of like, oh, this isn't a good action, right? And because they did something wrong, because I did something wrong, because whoever did something wrong, that doesn't make them a bad person. But I think when it is a community setting, you have to have a bad person. You have to have a bad guy, a villain. So it became, I was told I was evil. I was told I was a sociopath, a psychopath, crazy. You get death threats, all that stuff, and then I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll quit comedy. I'll go to church, right? And I did that. And then they were like, oh, now he's trying to rebrand himself as a Christian comedian. I was like, I've always, what? I've talked about God before, like, and going to church and stuff. But now I'm like, I'm actively trying to do the right thing and like leave this person alone, and I got away from you. Why are you still talking about me?
So it's almost like they're saying like, no, we've cast you as the villain in our community. You can't not be the villain, because then we have to find a new villain, and that's a pain.
Yeah,
it's a lot of work.
Well, it became kind of a steady rotation that I picked up on, and I think that's why people were like, oh, we can reach out to Martin because he doesn't mind talking about it or whatever. But it became kind of a steady rotation of someone in the comedy world would die, we'd be sad for a week, and then we would kill somebody in the comedy community.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So that was like this weird back and forth, and I was, and
so this all happened in Chicago, right?
Yeah, it was Chicago.
And then via social media and like super motivated crusaders on the internet, it started to bleed over when you came to LA to do comedy, because people in the comedy community was like, no, he was our villain back then. So if you need one now, he's available.
Yeah. Here's my headshot.
Right.
But yeah, which was always weird because it was never. It felt like this person's moved on, right? She's doing her thing. I'm not gonna go back there. We're not gonna talk. Whatever. I've sent my apologies. However they want to take it, they can take it. But I've done everything I can to work on me. You know, I've donated the money. I've put in the time. I've did the therapy. I was on Zoe. I literally lost my mind. Right. I was going to kill myself. Right. I had a knife to my wrist. I was filming this sketch show for True TV, and got the call from my some people back home at the time. And they're like, yeah, we can't, right?
They just canceled the thing in the middle of it, or what?
No. So I was just an extra on this thing.
Gotcha.
And I was supposed to start writing for this TV show in New York, and then they called me and they're like, yeah, we can't because of what's happening with this, right? Because it was in the middle of it, and I remember crying and being like, well, that's it. There's no other option but suicide. And literally, as I had the knife to my wrist, my mom calls me and tells me the story. She's crying, right? And but two unrelated cries. And she was saying she was driving in Atlanta, I think on I-20, and there was a kid who was I had to be in early 20s, but was sitting in the middle of the freeway trying to get hit by a car, and so it stopped up traffic, and people had pulled off to the side and grabbed the kid to move them over to the side of the freeway,
right?
And they're all holding, and kids no, I just want to is crying, I just want to die, and my mom was moved by this, and then she goes, how are you doing? And
good timing.
Yeah, and I go, I can't, I don't think I can do this. I can't get through this. And so then she's like, if something happens to you, then I have no will to go on.
Yeah.
So a lot of it was kind of a, not even a fight for survival, but a thing of, well, I've held myself back. I've done everything I can do, and realizing that for some people that's just not. It doesn't matter.
It's you pled your case to the community that did this, and they were very clear that they didn't care about you as a person. They cared about you as the symbol of this crusade. And so whatever you did as a person is irrelevant to them.
Yeah.
And so just kind of hitting your head against a wall, trying to appeal to their better nature, because maybe individually they have better natures, but as a collective that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. I'm glad that you moved on beyond trying to pander to them.
Yeah, well, I remember there was these two people who they sent me they kept going after me on Twitter, right? And I sent them a message, a group message to both of them on Facebook, and I was like, hey, why do you we only had positive interactions. I don't know you for real. So why is this something that you feel so? I'm not doing that many shows. I'm not I'm not working here. I'm not working there. I'm not doing this, that, the third. So what is it that this is supposed to do for you, right? And they didn't have an answer to that of why are you doing this instead of if there's someone if it's this person who's I dated him and I hate him, right? And even then, I remember talking to a past girlfriend, and she was like, I hate you and you have to be okay with that. That's fine. Yeah, that stings, that hurts. That's something I think about on a regular basis. But this person's they're not actively well, how do I make sure he never feeds his family or is able to live, right? So it's I don't, so I go, what's your end, what do you want from this as someone who's not involved in any way, shape, or form? And they're oh, someone feels like he's getting bullied by the two queer kids. I'm that's not what I'm asking. You want to fight me on this.
I feel like that's also kind of crazy making, which is when you make a reasonable appeal to an individual human being, and they're oh no, we're not. There was never a conversation between two people happening. This is just, this is how I score points online. So if you think that you're going to get an answer out of me as a reasonable, rational human being, you're barking up the wrong tree. We were just reminded. I was just reminded of another quote that I want to read to you. Again from the piece, So You've Been Canceled. You have to forgive people who called you out or said things about you. You have to forgive people who never spoke to you personally, who blocked you, who went after your livelihood or family. You have to forgive people who you loved, who hurt you, who you hurt. Most importantly, you have to forgive yourself. I imagine that was a necessary part of coming back from the brink of all this stuff. But like, it still seems impossible to do. So how did you do that?
In some cases, I haven't, and I think that's something I'm still working on because I do have like a lot of resentment. I'll look and think about where I could have been, but maybe I'm not supposed to be there. Maybe that wasn't the path that I was supposed to be on. But a lot of it, for a lot of it, it's like realizing, oh, this person was miserable, or this person was hiding their own deep dark secrets. Like it's interesting to look back now 7 years and hear, oh, such and such was cheating on their girlfriend the whole time, or this girl was cheating on her boyfriend the whole time, or this girl raped this dude, or this guy was like drugging people. Like you find out all these things when you're on the sides and kind of quiet.
And these were all members of the mob previously.
Yeah. This person got arrested for X, Y. So it was always crazy to kind of take a step back and see like everyone is hiding their own thing, or everyone is trying to minimize their shit by amplifying yours. And I think for me, like realizing like, oh, these aren't like big, strong, tough people, because there are a lot of times where I would just like after a while I was like, I'm going to just talk to this person directly. Hey, you said this, what's up? Like, what's going on? And they would fold. They would be, because I think it's so easy online to type something, get rid of it, and now you're not, you don't have to look someone in the eyes as you stab them in the stomach, right? It's easier to throw knife emoji on social media,
especially if you're doing it behind like an anonymous avatar of some kind and not even like your real life identity.
Yeah.
But I guess even for people who are using their real name, it's performative. There's a lot of performative stuff that goes on online that if you go up to somebody's door, you might break down that veneer for a second and get a real response out of them.
Yeah.
How do we solve for that? I mean, we're only spending more time on our phones. We're only spending more times in our filter bubbles. More of our interactions are online. Live theater seems to be dying, in my experience. I'm resisting it, but it's like people want to do everything online. So how do we fight against this trend of people's emotions and politics getting weaponized and doing this to people?
I say the best thing to do when you are about to tweet something that could be, and I know like Twitter has like now a new filter of like, hey, this is a crazy thing you're about to say. You sure you want to do that? I think when you start to type something or share a story, share an experience, whatever, that has the potential to affect someone or for them to see it. Number one, remember, anybody can see anything at any point. So someone will likely find that, right? If your goal is for that person to get help or get better, then reach out to them personally. And it could be in a group setting. It could be whatever that you feel the safest, right? Do that. If your goal is, I don't want this person to have opportunities, then also, then talk about your own experience. If it has nothing to do with you, shut the fuck up. It's so simple. But I think that's the other thing is we want everything to do with us. We want to be involved with everything. And sometimes it's okay to take a step back and be like, oh, that's not my community. So I'm going to let whoever is the leader or whoever is directly involved, they can deal with that situation because that's their thing. That's their fight. That's their crusade. I can cheer them on. I can support them, be it financially or mentally, emotionally, whatever. And that's not the case of like people are dying or whatever, right? If it's something violent, then step in. But if it's a thing of just reputation destruction, then what do you gain or benefit from participating in that? And you have to really step out of the sphere of your phone or your computer and ask yourself that. But also, like we had mentioned someone we know who is a big purveyor of that, and I remember asking him because he loves just I heard this thing. It's like, what does that do for you to tell me? I don't know this person. And I don't give a shit, but why do you care so much?
Do you feel like he feels like it's raising his own political capital? Because, I mean, I don't know. It's just juicy. It's just juicy to talk about somebody in the community who did a thing. Yeah. You feel like you're gaining attention by doing it. But at the same time, you're making the right signal to the people you're talking to that, like, well, I'm a good person, but here's what I heard about.
Well, I think something that people forget is when you do that, you also end up holding a lens to yourself. So if someone hears, because that was another thing I told him, I was like, if I went up to your ex-girlfriend, the girl you lived with, and I asked her to tell me 5 things about you, how many of those things do you think would be nice? And he was like, I don't think any of them. Okay, so right now we've established that you might have been the abuser in a relationship, or you might have been the aggressive one, or you yelled at her, you threw something, or whatever, right?
And especially if she chose to find like 5 bullet points of the worst things that you did in a many-year relationship, it's not hard to crystallize that into something that sounds like you're a horrible person in the context of a tweet.
Yeah.
Like,
easily.
It's very easy to like dumb down and be so reductive that you're like, here are 3 things this person did. I'll just leave that there. And you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
It's a monster. Well, and then it's a human being.
Yeah. And then you take away the, 20, 30, 40-year experiences of this person, their own traumas, their own upbringing, their own good deeds, their own like kindness, their own, heart or whatever that could, like, why does that not shape and mold who this person is with, like, oh, they fucked up here, or they made this mistake, or they didn't know this, or this wasn't communicated properly. We take that element of humanity away because, again, when you're looking at a phone, it's cold, it's hard. You don't have to worry about the dead body that's on the other side of it because you're like, well, that person's dead already, so I can move on.
I think that you've really hit the core of the issue, which is just what we're talking. This phenomenon of canceling, or whatever you want to call it, is ultimately dehumanizing a person because you can't effectively cancel somebody if you empathize with them as a person and what they've gone through.
Yeah.
Even if it's like a legitimately horrible person, like,
yeah,
you'll find a reason to try to rehabilitate them or to help them somehow if you empathize. But yeah, is this just this tendency towards dehumanization? Is this just something because we're all collectively being dehumanized all the time because we're giving more and more of our personalities to the social media sphere? We're giving more and more of our time to these devices. We're lending our memory to our phones. We don't have phone numbers. Is it like, are we being dehumanized and therefore it's easy for us to single out and ostracize somebody and dehumanize them? Do you think those things are related?
I think so. And I think even beyond that, we dehumanize ourselves in our, like personally, like even me, I'm like there are days I wake up and I'm like, why'd you talk shit to that girl? Like, or what, you could have been nicer to this person or whatever. Right. And when you, or even beyond that, you're too fat, or your head's small. Like recently, my whole thing is like, I'll look in the mirror if I'm wearing like a jacket, and I feel like I look like the Koopa Troopers from the Super Mario Brothers movies with John Leguizamo. And I'm like, why do I think that? Why am I tearing myself down? And then that's going to amplify for other people. So I think as soon as we wake up, our first thing is to dehumanize and hate ourselves, and especially now we have this like body positivity kind of like rah thing, but at the same time, like, the reason people have to do that is because there's those internal voices of like, you realize you're fat, right? And you're like, no, but my fat is beautiful, or whatever. So we have that, and then you go on, and then as soon as you say my fat is beautiful, you go online and see like, someone super skinny and super hot with a great butt and this, that, the third. And then you have to contend with that, and then you get angry, and you look for, well, why do I don't look like this person, but I bet this person is hiding something, and then you just you go to tear down something so you feel better. So I feel like if we bridge the gap of, and it's not like phones and the internet's going to disappear, but I think what we have to do is kind of bridge that gap of how we can make ourselves happy, how we can heal our own past traumas and past relationships, deterrences, but also be honest with ourselves of, if the shoe is on the other foot and someone found out about the skeletons in my closet, how would I regard their reaction? Should I be the one to do the same thing that I wouldn't want done to me? So like the golden rule.
He who cast the first stone. I feel like there's a lot of meat left on the bone, but I think we've come up to our time limit. So, Martin, thank you so much for being a part of this. I'd love to have you back and talk more about the meme-verse and how we can manipulate it, or how it's manipulating us. But thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Till part 2.
Till part 2. This is AI Affected, where we talk about human relationships and algorithms and how the two can get along.
Did I say anything?
No, I think we're good.
Oh.
I think we're out. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know that we're bleeding over into the next time slot, but yeah. Did I surprise you by like reading your quotes back to you and stuff?
I wasn't expecting that. I like those.